Hi guys! I wanted to do a walkthrough of my current Hobonichi Cousin setup since I'm coming to the very end of this planner. It's a 2017 Spring Cousin and I thought it would be a good time to show it to you before I switch over into my 2018 planner. I'm still using this Love by Gabby Hobonichi cover, which I absolutely love. I'll leave it linked down below. And I have been using a mechanical pencil for the whole year, and I love that too. So I don't think anything much has changed since the last time. On the inside pockets I keep some library cards and business cards since this is my work planner. So everything in here is work related. And I've got some A4 paper folded in half here that's just information that's relevant to the current and upcoming academic years, and a picture of my dog Panda. And a picture that my friend gave me which just sums up everything perfectly, I think. I don't use these yearly calendars for writing, but I do sometimes consult them, and I have actually on occasion made some notes here for the upcoming year beyond the time when the cousin runs out. I've actually started putting more detailed information onto the last monthly spread, which I'm going to copy over soon into my new cousin. So this is a little bit redundant. Then my vertical monthly spreads I've been using as an index to the daily pages. I've been doing this all year now and I really like this system. Basically, I'll show you when we get to the daily pages, but I've been using the daily pages as a combination of daily planning notes and less time-sensitive work notes, so things like projects and ideas and meeting notes, which I'll show you in a minute. And I've just been using this to record pages that I would particularly like to be able to find quickly and come back to in later months. So as you can see, this is the first 6 months of the year, and then this is the second 6 months. So a lot of them are blank because often if I use the pages for daily notes or just random notes that I'm not going to need to reference, I don't record it in here. But sometimes I have had to come back and look for things that I wrote down many months earlier, and it's been really convenient having the index in here so that I can find them quickly. For the first 6 months of the year, I was using the top here to record things like conferences and summer schools and events where I was going to need to be in a particular place, just so that I could see at a glance what was coming up. And on the bottom, I was using it to record research projects that I wanted to focus on for that month. So this is kind of a holdover from an earlier time when I was using this whole spread as an at-a-glance calendar. So I used to mark off things like when I was away at a conference or when I had an evening class, that kind of thing. And then when I started using this as an index, I kept on using the top and the bottom to record activities and projects. I don't actually use this a lot, so as you can see here, for the most recent 6 months, I haven't recorded any activities. Part of that has been because this is the teaching year effectively, October till March, in UK universities, and so most of the time everything has been quite routine. I've just been teaching and I haven't had special events like summer schools or conferences, although I did have one conference and I didn't write it down here. Similarly, I kind of trailed off using this to write down research projects because I guess as these 6 months go, there's a lot more day-to-day stuff that I have to do, like teaching and admin, whereas in the summer months, as these are, after classes finish, it's much more research heavy and summer schools and conferences. So I'm not sure when I switch over to my new cousin what I'll do. It could be that I'll pick back up with this system again and use this for writing down events that are going to happen at a particular time and use this for research. But there's a little bit of redundancy because my monthly spread, which I will show you next, is also a place where I write down research projects that I need to work on in that month. And this is also where I put things that are kind of unallocated in more detail beyond the fact that I know that I should look at them in a given month. So there's a little bit of overlap between this spread and this spread, and I like to try to keep the overlap to a minimum so that I'm not writing things down more than once, and also so that I feel like I know exactly where to look for every given thing. So I might just leave this purely for an index and not worry about the fact that there is blank space at the top and below. One of the things that I love about the Cousin is that it's so versatile, and it gives you so much space, and it leaves it up to you what you want to do with it. So I think the fact that there is blank space up here isn't necessarily a bad thing. If I don't need it, that's fine. Somebody else might need it for something, because, you know, someone might use this for a completely different purpose than me, like tracking, for example. So moving over onto the monthly spreads, you can see the first of my amazing yes-no shtajikis pencil boards. I absolutely love these. These came out with the Hobonichi Spring 2018 release, and I first ordered one of them, and I loved it so much that I ended up ordering another two. I ordered the other two from Japanesey Shopper because I didn't want to have to pay customs fees just for a couple of pencil boards. So I'll leave Japanesey Shopper linked down below. It's an Etsy shop, and I had a great experience with them. It came really quickly, and there were no customs fees. So if you live in Europe, that is useful information. Now, this is the latest in a long line of attempts to find a great system for marking pages, because this cover doesn't have built-in bookmarks, and I absolutely love this cover, so I'm really happy with it, but I wanted to find a way to mark pages, and I've been trying all kinds of different things, like, let's see, I don't have any more, but I had some really cool paper clips from Kiki K that were round metal ones. They come in silver and gold, and I loved them, but they leave an indentation on the pages, which is not a major thing for me because this is a work planner and I don't need it to look especially pretty, but I found that it was sometimes also difficult to find them and flip to them because they were quite thin. So this pencil board is just perfect because you can immediately locate it and flip to it, and I just really like the yes-no. Basically, I got this partly because I find it very difficult to say no to work projects, and as a result I end up getting overwhelmed, way over my head, having endless amounts of work to do, and so I thought that this might be a good way for me to practice saying no. So I leave it open to the no page, the no side, and I can also easily flip to the right week or month. So I've got one in the monthly spreads, one in the weekly spreads, and one in the daily spreads, and I'm really happy with that. I don't actually use it as a pencil board, I just use it as a page marker. So, on to the monthly spread. So, in previous videos when I've talked about these monthly spreads, I've mentioned that I feel like I'm kind of underusing them because I don't like writing things in more than one place, as I mentioned, so I don't write appointments on here. I write appointments on the weekly spread, and I just check the weekly spread if I have to make new appointments, and I find that a lot easier because then I don't have to write things in two different places. But what I do use the monthly spread for is more long-term planning. So for example, if I want to know how many days in a given month I'm going to have to work on a particular research project, then I kind of map out how many days I'm going to be teaching, let's say, or if I'm going to be away, and then I can basically use that to work out how many days I've got left over. I also use it for checking things like dates. So for example, there is a Jewish holiday, Purim, on the 1st of March, and so if I've got that written in here, then I can see, you know, like what we needed to do in our department to, you know, to celebrate it, etc. That kind of thing. So it's more of a kind of bird's eye view, and it's a little bit random in that, you know, sometimes I might write something down, like here's the end of term and I'm going to Paris for a workshop. So I write that down just so that I can see what the month looks like, but I don't write down individual appointments, and I don't write down things like if I'm in university or if I'm at home, unless I need it for particular project planning. So I guess I would say that I use this more on an as and when basis rather than having to keep it updated. I go to it more when I need to check something or when I want to calculate something. And like I mentioned, I also use this left-hand column to list tasks that I need to do sometime in the month, but I'm not really sure when, and so I don't want to put them onto a particular week. And then I know to check this periodically, and then when I see something, it reminds me like, oh yeah, I have to prepare the Paris talk. And then when the time gets close enough, I'll slot it into a weekly spread, and then I can cross it off because it's not like floating around on the monthly spread anymore. I've put it somewhere more specific. And then I'm using the May spread to write all of my forward planning on, which I think is not actually ideal because I've run out of space, so I can't show it to you because it's got some personal information on it. But it basically, I've kind of tried to use the, let's see, just show you here, giving you an example. I've tried to use the space down here and divide it into June, July, August, September, and write down all of the events that are happening on those days, or like in those months in this space, and I basically run out of space. So what I think next year is I'm going to try doing something completely different for forward planning, and I'll show that to you when I do a video of my initial setup of my 2018 Spring Cousin, which will be coming up soon because I'm going to be switching over in the next couple of weeks. Right, so on to the weekly spreads. So as many of you know, the weekly spreads are really the core of my planning system for my cousin. I put in my whole schedule, everything that's timed, and also I put in my to-dos until the to-dos get to be too numerous and I end up having to switch over to the daily pages. But I start off with my to-dos on the weekly spread, and it depends on the day basically. Some days the weekly spread is enough and I don't need to go to a daily spread. And in that case, I use that daily page for notes, which are not time related. So this is a little bit of an unusual week because my university, well, many of my colleagues and I, and also colleagues at about 64 other universities in the UK have been on strike for the past few weeks because of a major dispute over pensions. So this is a very atypical week because usually I would have a lot more stuff in the weekly spread here, but you can see this is a mix of what's actually happening now, which is basically just standing on the picket line. It's what I've been doing most mornings. And some things that were scheduled to happen beforehand, before the strike started, that have now been cancelled. If there's an event that's running for more than one day, I'll put it up at the top here. So the strike is going for the whole of this week, and so I've just put it up at the top so that I can see this is the main thing that my eye focuses on when I turn to the weekly spread. And I sometimes will use these top 3 boxes for not necessarily 3, but the top 1 or 2 things that I want to focus on that day, but I generally only do that if there's one particular major event that's happening that day, or if there's something that, if I'm going to be at home working on a research project and I want that to be the focus of the day, I'll put that in beforehand so it's kind of like forward planning, and then I can see, right, on this day I want to be doing X. But if I'm going to be in the university doing lots of different things, teaching and admin and stuff like that, then I don't put my top priorities up here because it's not really relevant. So I use this on a day-by-day basis depending on what the day is like. And at the bottom I use this for to-dos, and so this is why it's so blank, because it's an unusual week. So these to-dos that go down here are day-specific to-dos. If I don't get something done in that day, then I cross it off and move it to the next day. And on the left I write either things that I want to do sometime during the week, but I'm not sure which day. I will put them on here so that I don't lose them. Or I will write down just random notes that I want to be able to reference over the week. So for example, I was editing a journal issue and I had to send out an email to the contributors to the journal issue asking for some details for them that the publishers needed. And so I wrote down a little log here so that I could track who had got back to me, because it was just convenient having it here, kind of like a dashboard for the week, so that I can always look at it easily rather than putting it on a daily page. So that's the sort of thing that I would put on this column here, and as you can see it's blank because of the unusual nature of the week. But I still have a few different things that are going on over the course of the week, which are going in the hourly layout. So usually if I have a fixed event like a meeting or something, I will circle the time, and if it's on the half hour then I'll write in, see there it says 30 if that's starting at 3:30, and then I will use the grids to mark off how long I expect it to last for. If there's a particular time that it's lasting for, like this is lasting from 9 until 12, and then there's a meeting for an hour. So sometimes I won't put an end time on if I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but it can be quite useful when I've got things that do last for a specific time so that I can see, okay, all of this time is taken up, for example, on Thursday afternoon. So here you can see an example of how I use the bottom of the spread. I'll just use this for to-dos that have to be done on a particular day. So that is basically how I use the weekly spread, and like I said, all of my appointments go in here, everything that's time related, and I put in everything that is time specific, whether it's work related or not. So for example, we're going to the cinema tonight, which is very exciting, and I put that in because it affects my schedule. So I want everything to be in one place. So even though it's not work related, I put it in here because that way there's no question of me thinking on a typical week, I would see that this was blank and I'd think, oh great, I've got all evening to work, when actually, I need to put in the cinema because that is also time that can't be used to do something else. So anything that has a time I'll put in here, but if it's a personal to-do, then I'll put it in my personal planner, which is my Hobonichi weeks. So that's the weekly pages, and then onto the daily pages. So with the daily pages, like I said, I use them for a combination of two different things. I'll use them for, let me just show you here, daily notes when the week gets too busy. So if I've got a lot of stuff going on in a given week, I run out of space quite quickly here. And then as soon as I feel like I'm running out of space, usually on the same day, but sometimes it might be a day or two in advance if I know that there's just going to be a whole bunch of stuff going on and it won't fit in here, then I'll switch over to the daily pages. So what I do with the daily pages is I use the Remember This page at the beginning of each month as a monthly index, and I number it with the days of the month, and then I write down what that day was used for. So you can see here it says daily notes, and then some of these are other things that are not daily notes. So author consent form, student-led events, grammar targets, a funding issue, and then a blank page, and then some daily notes. So what happens here is, if the day ends up being used for daily notes, then generally I don't need to go back and consult it again. So here, this is just to-dos. This is just stuff that in the event, I didn't actually need a lot of space here, but I had felt like it was getting too crowded on the weekly page, and so I switched over to this. This is a more typical example of a daily page. There's just so stuff that I have to do in the university, and then stuff that I have to do at home, answering emails and finding information for colleagues and stuff like that. And so I'll just list everything that I need to do, and then I've got tons of room and I don't have to worry about running out of space. And quite often I end up with blank space at the end, and that's okay because the whole page is allocated for those notes. And that's another reason why I love the Cousin, is because I feel like there's enough room for everything that I might want to do. So if it's a daily notes, then I just write daily notes in the index, and that's the end of it. If it's a day where I don't have a lot going on and I don't need to use this for daily notes, then I leave it blank. So like for example, this page, 28th of February, is blank because I didn't need it on the 28th of February. And then I go back and use those blank pages when I need to write something down that is not necessarily related to the day. It might be something like a list of student projects that the department is funding, say. So something more long-term, like reference-y type stuff, which doesn't necessarily correspond to a particular day. The project might have been initiated on a particular day, but it's not really relevant. So sometimes if I remember for something like that, I'll write down the day that I actually wrote it down, but usually I forget to, and it doesn't really matter that much. So, for example, here's some notes on a project that I'm working on about Greenlandic. The day is irrelevant. It's just stuff that we needed to remember to do to cross off our to-do list for the book that we're working on. So that happened to be a blank page, and I wrote it down there. This is another one. This is an article that I'm working on. with another colleague, and I've just written down some notes for that. So when I need it, I can come back to it and consult it, and I can find it because I'll put it in the index at the front here. So that's how I use the daily pages. It's a combination of actual day-specific timed stuff, to-dos, and more long-term notes that I might need to come back to and consult. And so during the month, I use this index, and I put a star next to something that I think I might need to come back to later to make it easy to find. When it gets to be further than a month away, then I'll go back and put it in this initial index so that I don't have that many different headings to read through, and I can just go here and find it straight away. So that's basically how I use the monthly, weekly and daily pages, and I feel like it works really well. I've been using this system for, I think, maybe this is the 3rd year. There have been some tweaks, but it's more or less been constant, and I think it works really well as a work planner. Some people have asked me if it bothers me that some days have the date, which is the correct date, and some days don't. And that doesn't really bother me, I think, because generally I try to keep everything within the same month. So I know that, let's say, anything that I've noted down in February will generally have happened in February. If I end up having some blank pages, it usually doesn't happen that I have more than a couple of blank pages at the end of the month. And in fact, I think up until February, I've used every single page of the daily pages in this book. But in February and March, I've got a couple of blank pages. And so let's say in March, if I were to run out of room and need to go back and use a blank page in February, I would try to write the date down so that I know that I wrote that down in March. But it doesn't really bother me so much because I know that it's around the same time. So I'm not really sure why that doesn't bother me, but it seems to work quite well. And I guess it's the fact that I've got a mix of dates which are used, and then like kind of blank days which I then go back and use for something else. For some reason it doesn't bother me at all. And I think also because sometimes if I'm taking notes on something, like say at a conference I need to take notes, I might use up more than one daily page. And you know, I know that those notes were all made at the same time. So I think of them more as numbers that I can then go back and use, you know, like almost as if the pages were numbered, but they just have this numbering system that looks like dates. That's kind of how I think of it. And the one thing that I do is I make sure that the current day is always blank. So if basically I don't let myself get ahead of myself on the daily pages, because I might end up needing that day to use for daily notes. So I don't like kind of write into the future, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm perfectly happy if I end up with a blank page in the past, because then if I need an extra page, let's say I'm making some really complicated notes and I need a couple of pages and I don't want to use my current day because I might need that for to-dos, I'll just go back and find a blank page, and then it's kind of safe because I know that I don't need to worry about using up my current day and then needing that for to-dos later in the day, if that makes sense. So you can see my 3rd pencil board in action here. The rest of this is just the kind of end pages. I've got a couple of things written on the end pages, like students' marks for the current year and things that are nice to be able to go back and reference quickly. And I've also got all of the addresses and phone numbers and email addresses of colleagues and students and staff that I might need to refer to in the blank pages here at the very end after the dated section, so that they're all in one place. And first of all, so that I know that if I wrote down an address or a phone number or an email address, that I know immediately where to find it and don't have to look through, and also for video purposes so that I don't have to worry about uncovering that information because it's all right at the end. So in the back here there's just another picture of Panda, and then this is a booklet where I keep information that I like to transfer from year to year. And then I've got some sticky notes here in the back, and that's it. So I've only got another 2 weeks left in this cousin, and then I'm going to be switching over to my 2018 spring cousin, which is really exciting. So I hope that you enjoyed this. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!